Thank you so much, Greg, for that introduction and for the invitation to be here today. My name is Carlos Monje. I'm the Undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Transportation. I want to recognize the other keynote speakers, including some colleagues in public service. Mayor Suarez, who I just got to spend a little time with, who is not only mayor of Miami, but the vice president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I'm looking forward to meeting later today the UK Parliamentary Undersecretary, the Secretary of Transport, Trudy Harrison. To everyone participating in this important conference, I want to thank you for what you're doing to improve transportation in the U.S. and around the world. It's exciting to be part of CoMotion LA. This event really has become a marquee gathering of new mobility partners connecting top technologists and startups with policymakers and transportation leaders. And I understand that over the last 2 days, you've been sharing knowledge on topics as disparate as effective first mile, last mile solutions, using drones to deliver medical supplies, and harnessing new mobility data to help the public sector make better and more informed decisions. Let there be light. This is really my first chance to really travel beyond the East Coast since coming back to the department, and I feel lucky to be here with you, not only because I'm here in person, but also in what has become an historic week for the Biden administration, for the country. As you know, earlier this week, the president signed the most significant investment in jobs and infrastructure in many of our lifetimes, bipartisan agreement with support from both sides of the aisle. Today, we are faced with enormous challenges: the effects of climate change, widening racial inequity, and a still rebounding economy and a global pandemic. The president's bipartisan infrastructure law, and that's what we're calling it now, the bipartisan infrastructure law, gives us the tools to meet these challenges. We do really see it as a once in a generation opportunity to meet this consequential moment and to win the future. The need to modernize our infrastructure has been clear for a very long time. Decades of systemic underinvestment have led it into a state of disrepair. By one international reckoning, the country has fallen to 13th in the world in infrastructure, and we have a chance to reverse that trend. The bipartisan infrastructure law will create good jobs for people with or without a college degree. It's going to modernize infrastructure that in some cases is a century old by making major investments in our roads, bridges, rail and transit, ports and airports. It will improve safety for our communities, meaningfully address the climate crisis, and advance equitable access to transportation. Let me share some of the exciting details. The deal contains the largest investment in roads, bridges, and highways since the invention of the interstate system. It's $110 billion in new funding to help fix infrastructure that's been neglected for decades. It includes more than $40 billion for bridge repair and replacement, so we can avoid the devastating closures we've seen all over the country, just like we've seen in Florida and Tennessee and too many other communities across the nation. $15 billion for mega projects that are too large or complex for traditional funding programs. This is my second stint at the department, and had the honor of running our Tiger Grant program. It's now called RAISE. And what we see is that communities all across the country are just subdividing their projects into the most attractive bits, having to spend a ton of money on consultants, on lobbyists to try to get those projects over the finish line. With the addition of new funding into those programs, in the addition of MEGA, we're going to be able to do a more systemic approach, and hopefully that reduces the burdens on local communities. For transit, we have more than $90 billion in guaranteed funding, and that's the largest transit investment in our nation's history. We're all watching whether or not Build Back Better, the reconciliation package, has even more money for transit. But the funding that we have that was signed into law on Monday is going to help replace older rail cars, buses, modernize signals, and pay down the maintenance backlog. It's going to help transit agencies provide more frequent service and add new routes. It's going to make public transit and paratransit more accessible for the elderly, for people with disabilities, with almost $2.2 billion in dedicated funding. And it will bring transit service to new communities with $8 billion for the Capital Investment Grants Program, connecting more people to jobs, schools, hospitals, grocery stores, affordable housing and services in communities large and small. On the rail side, there's so many superlatives to this bill. This is the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak 50 years ago. It's also an historic investment in freight rail. I'm going to leave this session and go right down to the Port of LA, as many administration officials have gone. Our system is brittle and it needs investment. It's going to, the money in this bill is going to create multimodal rail hubs so we can transport goods seamlessly from ships to trains to trucks. It's the lifeblood of our economy, and it's critical that we invest in those connections. Because freight railroads are 3 times more fuel efficient than trucks, investing in freight rail also means investing in climate. Safety is the cornerstone of our work at the department, and we've seen a dramatic increase in roadway deaths, even as VMT has decreased 20,000 deaths in the first half of this year. Each one of those is preventable. Each one of those is a tragedy. And it's important to note that $5 billion in this plan is for rail improvements and safety grants, and $3 billion to make our rail crossings safer. This package invests some $13 billion towards making our roadways safer, including $6 billion for a new Safe Streets for All program that will help communities of all sizes reduce crashes and fatalities, especially for people who walk and bike. And those funds will support existing safety efforts as well as Vision Zero efforts. We're increasing funding for safety programs of all types, including the State Highway Safety Improvement Program. And we're doubling funding all in all for state and local safety efforts. Bipartisan infrastructure law makes historic investments in our ports and airports, $25 million for airports to address repair backlogs, reduce congestion emissions, drive electrification and sustainable fuels. It's also going to renovate terminals to make them more efficient, sustainable, and enable multimodal connections so it's easier to get to the airport without having to take a car. Across the government, it includes $17 billion for our ports to reduce bottlenecks when ships are unloading freight and to speed the process of getting cargo from ships to docks and to trucks, and to reduce the pollution in neighborhoods near the ports, which are these justice communities, environmental justice communities, disproportionately home to Black and brown residents. Of course, and this is something that really has driven a lot of our work. The plan is the largest investment in electric vehicle infrastructure and clean energy transmission in history. The president's plan funds the creation of a nationwide network of EV chargers. So travelers are going to have confidence that they can find a charging station just as easily as they can find a gas station. And we're going to particularly focus on low-income inner city communities and rural areas where it may not be economically viable to make those investments on highway rights of way. We're going to deliver thousands of new electric school buses, modernize our electric rail grid, and create jobs for engineers, electricians, and other skilled tradespeople. I know that this group is especially interested in what the bipartisan infrastructure law delivers in terms of emerging mobility and how DOT can support this work. I've talked a lot about dollars and cents, but this is also a 5-year policy bill, and one didn't do everything we wanted, but it did lay the groundwork for future-proofing some of our infrastructure. I want to call out a couple of these programs. Folks probably have heard about the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutioning Transportation Grants Program, or the SMART grants, discretionary grant program set to award $500 million over the last 5 years, over the next 5 years. I remember the last time I was at the department, we scraped everything we could, broke a lot of China to get 40 million for the Smart City Challenge. This is going to move the ball significantly forward. The plan in place, once we roll it out, you're really going to like building out cohorts of communities that apply and learn from one another and deploy technology in a way that's thoughtful and sustainable. The bill reauthorizes the University Transportation Centers, the UTCs, which is, again, the lifeblood of the ecosystem of research, government, industry. 95 million is going to be available over the next 5 years. Innovative mobility grants are going to be awarded through open challenge and pilot programs. The bipartisan deal modifies the Advanced Transportation Technologies and Innovative Mobility Deployment Program to include an intermodal connectivity and rural set-aside. It authorizes a new Center of Excellence on New Mobility and Automated Vehicles to research the impact of automated vehicles and new mobility, such as docked and dockless bicycles and electric scooters. And this is something that's very close to the Secretary's heart. It authorizes the Advanced Research Projects Agency Infrastructure, or ARPA-I, to fund research and development on advanced transportation technologies that look to.
Ciao Piero, dimmi.
Secretary Buttigieg has said that DOT must keep pace with innovation. We believe these new tools will go a long way to catching up. We will continue to rely on your partnership, on your thought leadership, on your vision to help us use the tools that are in this bill to take advantage of this once in a generation chance to preserve our climate, to advance equity,
Io non
and
avevo già
ensure our
ricevuto da
economic
qualcun altro,
competitiveness for
possibile?
decades to come. Thank you again for that warm welcome. I hope you enjoy the rest of the
Ok.
program.